Welcome to my webcast, Hacking with Burp Suite. One of my favorite tools all time. Carol and Jason already mentioned, but I'm Chris Dale. Basically, I've been hacking since I was a kid, growing up to become this little hacker. That was my mentality. But the path wasn't necessarily straight to becoming a hacker. I started out with development. I was thinking like development it will make me the king of the world if I can develop anything I want. But headhunted into IT operations from development, which I was stoked about because the more you know about different systems, the better. And then I got working into management for a couple of years, and oh man, it just slowly killed me inside every day at work. Just being a CISO and all, like doing all that paperwork, policies, procedures, it wasn't for me. I'm more like a keyboard warrior. So I got back into pen testing, back into incident response, and that's what I'm doing right now for network security. Lots of business. We're truly in the golden days of hacking. It's just amazing, lot of work, lots of things to do, and so much cool technology. The open source community, for example, within security is just beautiful. This talk, however, is going to be about Burp Suite. And Burp Suite is more or less a de facto tool for web app penetration testing today. There are like free alternatives out there like OWASP Zap, which you can use as much as you want, and it has most of the features that Burp Suite does. But I kind of like I prefer Burp Suite. I know how I can deal with certain problems with Burp Suite. I know how to solve my problems with Burp Suite, and it's not that expensive. It's overcomable. It's doable for most people. Some of the paid version features are like the fuzzing engine called the Intruder. It will not be throttled, where if you are using the free version, you will like only get like maybe 5-6 requests per 10 seconds. It's going to be like slow, and it's not going to be very effective. Additionally, with the paid version, you get a pretty decent active scanning feature. So that's like a vulnerability scanner for web applications, which you now can trigger through REST APIs, and you can automate scans and stuff like that. And it's quite decent, I would say. Also has modules you can plug into Burp Suite and allow it to extend its functionality. Overall, I love it. I love Burp Suite, and it's been with me for so many years. And that's why I decided to do this webcast, to help share some of my experiences with the tool and how the things that I've learned with the tool. So you will notice that this webcast will be not that much PowerPoint. It will be me going out of the PowerPoint and showing how the tool is configured, how it's being used with demos and so on. And hopefully that will be lag-free, and the transitions will be smooth, and everything will be cool. First nice thing about the Pro version is that you will get projects. So projects will basically allow you to persist your state, the current attacks you're doing and so on, to a file. So the entire history will be stored to the hard drive, and you can share this project file with your teammates. So you can, for example, collaborate on a project, and you can import each other's projects to get, for example, target information. You can get the site tree copied over, and you can get also vulnerability information copied over between your team. And that is quite nice, I would say. The file is not a clear text ASCII file, although you can run strings on it and you will get some information, but it's actually a binary file. And normally these files can grow really, really big, like tens of gigs sometimes. There's also the configuration file, which is plain text ASCII. And you can simply, for example, in my screenshot here, I have a config burp JSON file stored on my hard drive, and this contains information regarding, for example, which extensions I have loaded, the look and feel of Burp Suite, proxy settings, and more. You can share this configuration file with your team, maybe even have it in a version control system, so you can track changes on it and have like this default setting for your team to use for pen testing activities. Quite nice. There's also scan configurations. So as of Burp Suite 2.0, currently in beta, you have this little config library where you can configure your own type of scans and also curls. So the scans will be how you audit some certain problem, how you will run the active scanner against some certain problem, and the crawler will just be this old spidering functionality. And you can create your own configurations here, for example, to prevent the spider from logging into solutions or triggering context schemas and so on, and share these configuration files with your team. They are stored in the roaming folder of your app data folder, so you will have to go look for them, but they're definitely there, and you can share them, which is quite nice. However, the core of the tool, the meat is intercepting proxy, of course. The proxy is, I have these slides up for references for people who want the slides and so on, but I'd much rather show you the proxy in how it looks like in the tool. Most of the people listening already have extensive familiarity with the proxy already. So I'm just going to cover the things that I find the most valuable. The most valuable thing is definitely one of the most valuable things is the HTTP history, where I have sorted on requests in reverse. So I see the latest reverse at the top of this list. Quite nice to debug, to figure out which requests your browser has made throughout the history of you using this tool. You also have the WebSockets history, which we'll talk about more later, and we have the options. Now, this is where you can configure Burp Suite to listen on all interfaces, for example, not just the local host. Change the port. This is where you can export the private keys, so you can actually install the private key to, for example, your web browser or your Android phone and intercept those without much problems. Another nice thing here is being able to say intercept server responses as well. I know most people don't like that, they don't have this on because it's not on by default. But what I do is I tell my proxy tool to not only intercept my requests, my outbound requests, but also the responses, so I can read off headers, I can search for stuff in the contents, and more. Other things, we can disable WebSockets interception here, which is quite nice. There's some quality of life options here. I don't use these because I don't fully trust them. I would much rather use the match and replace tool down here, where basically I can say add a rule to change, for example, in the response body, change every statement saying administrator equals false. I can change this into administrator equals true, and this might trigger, for example, Angular to reveal more functionality. It will still be behind access control and authorization, but still it would perhaps change the application as I'm browsing it and changing it. So I do love these match and replace rules. The built-in ones are semi-decent. You can change, for example, you can tell your browser to your Burp Suite to pretend to be an iPhone here, for example, and that might change the application functionality as you're going about doing your testing. Disabling XSS protection, basically saying match this, add this little header here in the response saying XSS protection 0. It's not that useful because we should have our browser configured without XSS protection already. I'll show you more on that soon. And there's some other options here as well. For example, unpack gzip, which is very convenient for your proxy to do. So I want to show you also how it looks like when I'm capturing an intercept. So I'm just going to refresh this page, and this is my request now being intercepted. If I click forward, I'm also intercepting the response. And I can search in this response. For example, I can search for username. Down here. Notice that this is a free text field. I can change whatever I want. I can search for username, and it will highlight the different portions of the text where username is found. But perhaps the nicest thing with this search is being able to automatically search and scroll. Say, for example, we search for a line here, and we click this little plus button down here. It says auto scroll to match when text changes. So notice that when we now forward all the requests, re-intercept, click Control F5, forward, we get the reply, and now my input has already scrolled down to the bottom where it matches this word align. Same thing can be done with the repeater. I just press Control R, I send my request to the repeater. I can also tell it to, hey, auto scroll when my match changes. So this makes it very quickly and very effective to test things such as cross-site scripting. So overall, the intercepting proxy is, most of us know it, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it. But you do need a dedicated browser for hacking. You might have already seen my taskbar. I have like 5 different browsers for different reasons, but I'm using Firefox, the developer edition, for all my hacking activities. And I have configured it to be naked, so without any cross-site scripting prevention mechanisms and so on. You should be using a browser for hacking because you don't necessarily want a bunch of plugins to create background traffic. You don't want all your other tabs like Facebook and Gmail and so on to create background noise for you when testing. So keep one dedicated browser for testing and configure that one to use Burp Suite, and then you configure it to be naked. And here's a bunch of different parameters I have in my Firefox to make it silent, more quiet, so it doesn't send all of these outbound requests. For For example, you can just type in about config in your browser, and you can go about disable the cross-site scripting protection now. And that will allow you to find vulnerabilities that previously would be blocked by your browser. I mean, it's still a problem server side. You still have to patch it, even though your browser is protecting you. So please do hack naked. The captive web tester, just get rid of that stuff ASAP, because that's just annoyance. Automatically Googling and suggesting for you when you type something in the URL bar, that's not necessary. You don't want your browser to be smarter than you. It will leak data to Google. It will start making all these outbound requests that you don't want to see in your proxy. So turn that stuff off. Also, you might want to say that, hey, my browser will support weak SSL ciphers and protocols, so you can target those old web servers. That's nice. That's done with this little parameter here. Allowing mixed content will allow you to test cross-site scripting, cross-site includes, stuff like that, much easier and faster, because your browser will now allow HTTPS be intermingled with HTTP. And that might allow you to do a proof of concept much faster than if you were to have everything over HTTPS. And then there's just a bunch of other like telemetry stuff, all this crap that is just, like, it's supposed to make your browsing experience better, but as a pen tester, it just ruins your day. So this is going to be in the slides, of course, so you can go check them out yourself. Now, this is not a presentation on how to hack Android applications, but because of a lot of applications today on mobile phones are essentially just using web applications, I included a little slide on how to get yourself proxying on Android 8.0 and later application. So all we need to do basically is you decompile the application, you edit this Android manifest file that you will have in the decompile output, and you add this little Android network security config attribute. You point it to a network security config. It's an XML file, which you can tell your phone to trust Burp Suite certificate. You then open up your phone, drag and drop the certificate, install it as a VPN certificate, recompile, install the application, and you're all done. More details can be found on my blog down there on how to decompile, recompile, sign, and build on and install and all those things. So quite useful, and just wanted to include this as a little bit of tidbit for a lot of people doing mobile applications today. The sitemap feature of Burp Suite is just brilliant. It is very, very much effective and allows us to get a good grasp of the scope that we're seeing. So the sitemap is over here. I can currently see the things that I have browsed to. But as you start browsing more and more stuff, you will see that there's a bunch of third-party services that are being rendered, and there's a bunch of crap being displayed in your scope here, in your sitemap. So what I'd like to do is I would open up the scope tab, and I would say use advanced scope controls. And for my clients, I would add their top-level domains like this, /, so match anything, and then I would say my customer name, say example and /. I would not say example.com. I would say /example /. So I want to match any domain that has my client's name in it and other top-level domains that I'm targeting. I want that to be in scope. And then I would say in the sitemap, show me only in scope items. And that will clean out your sitemap quite a bit. In our case now, though, I'm already using a hack naked browser, so there's not a lot of things being displayed here, and I can keep it like it is. You also notice that I clicked an option to tell Burp Suite not to collect out-of-bound requests and store the requests in my proxy logs. This will prevent your project files into growing into very, 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 very big proportions. And it's a nice little feature. Can be disabled inside of options here, all the way to the bottom, because you can see, do not send items to proxy history or live tasks. All right, so the sitemap is cool, but it gets even better. So when I'm browsing an application, say I open up robust.txt, just by browsing to this robust.txt, I can see, let's see, do we have interception going on here? We should see robust.txt. Oh, another very important thing, do not hide empty folders. Keep this one open. And also, I like to see for request errors, like 400 request errors. This will sometimes give you more information regarding certain things. So in here, I do have robust.txt. I'm not sure why it doesn't show up in my sitemap. I've tested this 100 times already. Does the sequencer show up? Oh, it does. It does. So robust.txt, hiding CSS. We're going to just show other types of binaries here. See if we can figure it out. Burp Suite not showing any robust.txt. What about in our proxy log? Do we see the robust.txt being requested? No, it's not. So it's probably cache here, isn't it? Anyways. We do have the robust.txt, and all of these files here, these little disallow requests, they will be automatically categorized in the sitemap for you. So you can basically crawl these files and find them very, very easily. Hiding not found items. Let me just see if I can figure out. There's some reason. You see, I have two Burp Suite open actually. I have the old one and the new one. So we might be looking at something funny within the Burp Suite 2.0 here. But normally I would expect this to show up in a sitemap here, and it would automatically list all the different references here, and I could use those references to basically spider. So since it's not working right now, I'm just going to continue, and I'll see if I can have it working after, but we'll see. It doesn't really matter. But on the right side, you can see my screenshot that I did earlier, and it has all these grayed out links here, and some of them are actually black, and those are not for not found. Those are actually contents that will reveal sensitive information. Now, I'm sure there's some ridiculously stupid thing I just did that didn't allow me to show those things in the sitemap, but doesn't really matter. Content discovery, though. Very nice module to find information that might not be linked inside of the application. If I go into my application right now, I can say right-click in the engagement tools, and these are the pro version of Burp. I can go say discover contents, and in the config here, I do not want it to recur subdirectories. And this is a nice little tip, because if you let the content discovery run on any website, it might get stuck in trying to process too much information. There's just too many references, and it will just loop itself to death. So I like to not have it recurse when I'm targeting the root level of the web application. And I do tell it to discover files and directories. This is kind of like a dear-buster type of approach, using built-in word lists. And also, if you want to be a good pen tester, you should have a dedicated word list for your activities against your target. So if your target is in, for example, oil and gas, you should have a word list containing oil and gas terms, and you should have a word list containing proprietary terms like interesting words, the lingo of the target organization, and you would put that inside of this custom list here, and you might find directories and files that have those names in them. And you can see some of the configurations here, how the discovery module will try to discover more content for you. In, for example, flipping extensions to, for example, see if there's an index.php.back or index.back file, for example. Sometimes just by running the discovery module, you will find like a copy of the SQL database online. And I find it to be a nice, useful feature. It does need work. Don't get me wrong, it's not perfect, but it is quite useful. And it does go pretty fast. It depends on how you configure it. You see all the way down here, we can tell it how many credits you want it to have, how many spider credits, and so on. And it will go about discovering contents. And because I do not have it to recurse now, it will not go into the icons folder, not go into the graphics folder, and give me a bunch of information I don't need. It also has its own little sitemap, which will only display the things that it has discovered, which is a nice difference comparing it with this sitemap. Because now I can see that, hey, there's a security folder, for example, and I will see it's still here, but it might blend in with the rest. So I like having the sitemap, and now I can say, hey, I want to take this folder and now discover content, and you can just recurse as much as you want within this folder. I'm not too much worried about that. And you will find that there is stuff hidden on people's websites that you need to find. It's online, it's just unlinked. There's no web page or no script that links to them, and you need to find these things. And for example, diving deeper into the security folder here, you will see stuff like security.php, which definitely has, like, there's going to be vulnerabilities here, right? There's no doubt about it. There's going to be some things to find. So although it does need some work, the content discovery module, we use it every time. It is fantastic to be able to discover extra functionality and extra attack surface of the target web applications. Another functionality which comes from the extender is the paraminer. So in my sitemap here, I can right-click and say, hey, try to guess get parameters at this web page. So say, for example, I have a script here, intruder.php. Guess if there's any unlinked get parameters that we can find, and the paraminer will just measure the responses coming back, the amount of bytes, and see that, for example, when you send the argument developer equals 1, the get parameters like that, all of a sudden the application changes a bit, and we can flag those things and analyze them. But perhaps the most useful thing is guess headers, where paraminer will add a bunch of different headers, and it will see if the application behaves differently when it gets, for example, an X header or a referral header or some kind of other headers. can be configured up here, and it's supposed to be very quick. All it kind of needs some work. It needs to give you some kind of status, how far into its scan it has made itself. So hopefully James Kettle will fix that for us. All right, so content discovery is super useful. Should be run on all targets. And of course, it should be also run within these other subfolders here. There might be contents here that, although you don't get a directory listing, well, here you do, but say in any other folder here, like this one, there might be scripts that you need to find that otherwise is going to be exploited by someone else at a later time. When it comes to WebSockets, I would say that Burp Suite sucks. Unfortunately, it has gotten a bit better in the past 12 months, but it's not good enough. It allows you to intercept them. It allows you to modify them in the field, and you can play them and forward them, but it doesn't allow you to like replay properly. It doesn't allow you to intrude, like fuss them. So with WebSockets, I would recommend using tools such as WS Proxy or OWASP Zap even to do this type of work. Decoding has an amazing blog on how to use OWASP Zap on fuzzing and testing WebSockets. So you even have a little training module which you can download and run on your own web server to test your skills on WebSockets. But for Burp Suite, it's not good enough today, unfortunately. Now the decoder. I know people love the decoder for some reason. This little bit here, where you can decode some kind of, for example, you can decode hex and you can like get the results down here, then you can decode further. You can even do a smart decode input, try to guess the encoding. But I stopped using it like 12 months ago when I discovered CyberChef. CyberChef is, hallelujah, it's a nice little tool from GCHQ where it allows you, first of all, it's run offline. So it's not online. I've been tracking it for months. It does not do any outbound requests that I don't know of. And it allows us to do the same thing that the decoder does, but it does it on steroids. It's really powerful. So say, for example, I have this string up here. So the keen viewer, he might look at this and say, yeah, this is space 64 because of uppercase, lowercase, alphanumeric, the slashes and the pluses. And for some other people, you would have to have these little paddings at the end, and you will go, yes, space 64. However, you don't need those paddings for many cases, and we can use CyberChef to say from base 64, and we get some kind of output. So we add things, operations into a recipe, and we get the output display down here. Now, this is not human readable, but if we do a 2 hex and we analyze the first 3 bytes here, we could just Google away and say that these magic bytes, these 3 first bytes means gzip. And don't get me wrong, the decoder can also do gzip encoding, but the decoder doesn't have this, detect file type. And just like that, CyberChef, a tool written in JavaScript, tells me that, hey, this looks to be my type application gzip. So I learned a whole lot there. Then I can just do a gumzip here, and I can unzip the gzip, and we have a new string, which looks like all uppercase alphanumeric. Well, could be base 32. We can try, and lo and behold, we have some hex bytes. We can now do from hex, and it says, wow, CyberChef is so useful. We can even step through the process. We can disable the steps, and we can go back and from and do useful things with it. I'm going to be using CyberChef more in this presentation, so please do wait for that. There's just so much more stuff we can do with CyberChef. Nice thing is, though, with Burp Suite, you can, for example, mouse over URL encoded inputs, for example. In this case, I have this little long string down here in my cookies. I can mouse over it, and as I hover, I will get a decoding of the data from Burp Suite. That is quite useful in many cases. Burp Suite can also be configured to send its results to an upstream proxy. So you can chain requests. Basically, the reason I have 2 Burp Suites open at the time is because I'm chaining requests from Burp Suite 2.0 beta, and I'm chaining them to Burp Suite 1.7 something, which is the current proper version or the current stable version of Burp Suite. So I have 2 tools giving me feedback on what vulnerabilities there are and more. You can chain requests to, for example, Skipfish, Google's little vulnerability scanner, or W3AF, doesn't matter, and you can have these tools process your requests and scan them, for example, in additional ways. Also very useful is using Burp Suite as a SOX proxy. So inside of either user options or project options, you can define a SOCKS proxy, and you can send all your requests to go through this proxy. So it looks like you're coming from some other IP than the one that you're currently at. So you would simply, from say your Windows, or if you have SSH installed, or just type bash, type in SSH, your username, put it into your host somewhere online, connect to the port on SSH, give it the -D flag, and it will turn into this little local proxy and forward all your ports for you. Listening on port 9000, tell it to not die ever, just keep it up. And you can configure your Burp Suite like this. And it's very useful for example, maybe your team has to come from a certain set of attack infrastructure, but you're working from home, for example. Well, you can just now use Burp Suite to connect to that infrastructure and send and proxy all requests through that. Very, very useful. The extender is what we use to basically add modules and plugins to Burp Suite. Supports Java and also Python and Ruby plugins through these little extra jar files we can add to it. One of my favorites, or well, these are my favorites, basically anything by James Kettle. He's an amazing guy. He's the guy responsible for the active scanning functionality of Burp Suite. His extensions are quite nice to have. First one, though, is not made by him. It's Logger++. I use it for debugging. I use it to make sure that my requests are not timing out, that they are actually still current, like the sessions are alive. And I just use it to track my current attacks and make sure that they're working. Quite nice. Paraminer, we talked about earlier, very nice. The /power scanner, and this is where it gets really good in my opinion. It will try to find things that are just a bit weird, like when you send in certain inputs like calculations or whatever, and you get a different response than what you would normally get. It's not like a signature based, like this is a vulnerability, but it's just something weird, and it will flag those things for you so you can analyze them in your Burp Suite and figure out if there's a vulnerability or not. Very, very much nice, very nice tool. Same thing with Active Scanner. Adds a lot of extra checks for the active scanning functionality, but also adds these checks for interesting stuff like Angular expressions injections and JavaScript injections, and just to make sure that you can get those funny things out of the way. And this is actually where we really do pen testing, when we start to manually interact with the web pages and do testing. So Extender has a bunch of functionality to it. I like to just go to Extender and go to the App Store, maybe sort by popularity, and you will find what most people are saying is good plugins to your tool here. You can also sort by, for example, Pro Extension or not. But the ones I'm using are listed here. I don't have them all enabled at any given moment because I like to keep my Burp Suite a bit clean. But these are the ones I normally use. All right. So the extender is very nice. It doesn't take a lot of effort to write extensions to Burp Suite today. It has an API which is well documented, but you have to write them in Java though. Recently been released with a REST API, so you can interface with Burp Suite in a kind of light way, not very much functionality, but you can interface now with Burp Suite using the REST API too. But the Burp Collaborator, oh wow. That's just an amazing addition to Burp Suite. What the Collaborator will do is that it will listen to any callbacks to a bunch of randomized domains that Burp Suite has set up for you. So basically, I will open up my Collaborator here, Burp, and I will say Collaborator client, and it will just fire up like this. And if I click copy clipboard now, Burp Suite has created me this one unique domain name like this. And if there's any interaction, any DNS requests, SMTP, HTTP requests to this domain, I will get it in my list here. I will know it. Say, for example, I open up in Firefox, and it will then reply. If I click poll now, it will say that, hey, I just did 2 DNS requests. So that's probably like a firewall or some kind of device doing an extra DNS request for me, I don't know. And I did 3 HTTP requests just for this one query against a collaborator. But I know now, I know that this request, someone has made this request. It might be, for example, a reference in a JavaScript, for example, in an attack we are sending, or similar. So I'm going to show you this in the next slide, how we use this for fuzzing and more large-scale attacks. can be deployed privately as well, so you don't have to use their infrastructure. You can just use a private collaborator, and you would run it with just a Java command line like this. There's also Collaborator Everywhere, which is a nice plugin that I only enable while I'm browsing the website for the second time, the target website. Collaborator Everywhere will just add a bunch of different headers in all my requests, trying to trigger some kind of callback connection. And you might find that there's vulnerabilities where people are calling back to your domain name, asking for information. For example, I had an LDAP server once requesting information on me based on the domain I gave into an MDM solution, a mobile device management solution. And I could just set up a little LDAP server answering true to every question. Yes, there is a user of so-and-so. Yes, there is a domain of so-and-so. And I was eventually getting access to someone's MDM solution. But using the collaborator for fuzzing is where things get really, really interesting. So basically, in my list here, I can create any number of collaborators. I can, for example, create a bunch of collaborators that are matching up with a fuzzing word list I have. So I do have a small fuzzing word list. As an example, I have a word list here called attacks.txt. And it might be a bit small for you guys to see. I'm not sure what the resolution looks like for you guys. But here's a bunch of attacks, bunch of different attacks where it says replace me in between here and there. For example, little pipe symbol, ping N5 and replace me. Now I can replace all of these with collaborators using a little small tool that I wrote called like just merge, like collaborators merge. So what I'll do is that I'll open up collaborators here, create a new text file, yes. And I will create, so how many attacks do we have here? So type attacks, find, look for anything other than empty string. We have 73 attacks. So I'm gonna create 73 collaborators, put it on a clipboard, put it inside of this text document, remove this extra tab, and remove this, save it. And then I simply go ahead and say, look, run python.exe merge, and it will merge these two files. It will merge the attacks with the collaborators. So if I now send, for example, these attacks, I fuzz some kind of solution, say maybe a context schema, where you don't want to send thousands of requests. You want to send a limited number of requests. I can now send my request to try trigger, for example, say, for example, here we have an XXE, for example. And if this reference is ever requested by someone, if there's an XML parsing engine behind here, if someone ever goes to this URL, it will ping back to my collaborator instance, and I will know that the payload, this IE03, this collaborator here, will actually trigger this callback, and I know that there's an XXE vulnerability in the target solution. And I might get another request, for example, on this mail from here, and I can say, hey, this string, I would correlate it with the output from my payload list here, and I would say, yes, this collaborator, this attack caused the collaborator to receive a callback, and I know that the vulnerability exists within this type of category. It is very, very nice having this collaborator feature readily available for all of us, and we use it all the time. So what about JavaScript frameworks? I call them hipster JavaScript frameworks because they change all the time. And oh my God, it's so frustrating with all of this like complex JavaScript libraries with hundreds of thousands of lines of code. How do we test these things? Well, first off, Burp Suite 2.0 has a pretty awesome dynamic JavaScript analyzing engine. So it will give you a bunch of it will analyze your JavaScript and say, hey, this looks like it's a vulnerability. You're reading something from the DOM and it's been placed into the following JavaScript and then it's being used down here in the code. And you can find some pretty interesting vulnerabilities like that. However, for these JavaScript frameworks, I always run them through JS Parser, which is on GitHub, and you basically give JS Parser your URLs, and it will try to give you any reference to relative URLs, any URLs they can find, and you can start adding that to your attack surface and find vulnerabilities. I always also Google developer tools for the different frameworks. Say I want to work on Angular, I basically try to figure out how does the developers debug these things. I mean, they gotta have some tools to figure out what the capabilities are and figure out weaknesses and flaws and stuff like that. So very often these these little frameworks, they will have some solid extensions to your browsers that will allow you to explore them and figure out what secrets they're holding, and maybe trigger more functionality and allow you to get to those hard to reach parts. You could also, of course, just use the browser development console, like hit F12, set some breakpoints, set some watch points for different variables, and see how the application behaves. But I mean, stepping through like tens of thousands of lines of code is not very easy, so it might be very time consuming. A sequencer, that's a tool that is kind of like underappreciated. I find this tool to be rocking. So what it will do is that it will take any input, like any variable or whatever, and it will keep fetching those inputs thousands of times, and it will measure it to see if it's random or not. So I do have a little sequencer ready for us. Whatever happened to that Burp Suite robust.txt there? No clue what happened there. Worked like that at least 20 times earlier today. All right, so let's have this little challenge here. It says become admin to win this game. That's the challenge, right? So if I take a look at the source code, there's not much stuff going on here. If I intercept the request, we can refresh. We can see that there's not a lot of stuff going on here. But when we do send a request, we do get a cookie sent back. Another request. I'm just gonna delete the cookie. So right now the cookie is currently empty, and I don't get a new cookie. So I'm gonna go to network storage here, and I'm gonna say, hey, please delete this cookie. Refresh the page through Proxy here. Always funny with demos. I love demos, to be honest. And we do forward. We get a little cookie here. Now this cookie, is it random or not? How do you know? Like, I could fetch it one more time. I could see if the values change, but are they really cryptographically good randomness in this cookie value? It all depends. But the sequencer allows us to measure those things. So what we're going to do is we're going to intercept the request, and I'm going to have the cookie here, but I'm going to remove it because that will trigger the solution to send me a new cookie. I'm going to do actions send to sequencer. And it will automatically figure out that, hey, there's a token called PHP session inside of this field, and I can now start a live capture. And I can capture, say maybe like a couple of thousand requests. Like, that's probably good enough. And it just captured 3,500 PHP tokens for me, session tokens. And it will analyze them. Is this token randomized or not? And when you see red, it's very often not very good. So the summary here is saying that it's not good. If I go to bit conversion, you can see that the first half of the string does not look to be very much random at all. That's strange. What if I do copy tokens here, put it on my clipboard, and let me bring it up in Notepad here. What does Notepad tell me about these tokens? So there's a pattern here, isn't there? They all start with 4, and there's a 3D in the middle here. I can now take these tokens and I can analyze them with tools such as CyberChef. CyberChef, have it over here. I can now say, hey, please convert this to, like, it looks to be hex, doesn't it? So I convert it to hex, but this output is now garbled. There is no line feeds here. So I can add a little fork in front of my hex, and it will tidy up the output a bit for me. And all right, so we now have a more clean output, and we see the %3D, like that's the hex value for equal signs. So is this a delimiter? Is this something else? In fact, this could be like base64. This could be some encrypted value. Who knows how they created this session ID? So what I would like to do is I would like to do a little bit of trickery within the solution here. Just let me bring up my little cheat sheet here. So I do have a little runbook here. I'm gonna add a little bit of extra stuff. So we do have the collaborator sequencer. Yes, we're gonna drop some bytes. So I'm gonna basically shave off. We don't have cut, unfortunately, within CyberChef, but we do have a drop bytes. And I'm gonna drop every byte after the equal sign, and I'm gonna drop everything to the remainder of the line, giving us this output. Now I just deleted 8. I started from 8 bytes, so it's like a substring kind of feature, and I deleted all the bytes after this equal sign. Okay, looks like we're back. Almost a blue screen there, I guess. Just lagged for like 4 seconds. What happened? NSA, they're on me. So I can now drag and drop from base64, and because I'm inside of a fork right now, base64 will be run on all of these new lines. And you can see that these are just numbers. And you might ask yourself, what does these numbers represent? Can we fuss them? Can we attack them? Is there a parser? Like, what if it's like, can I add SQL injection into this? Who knows, right? But so far, it looks like there is this functionality where we have a number and then we have some other type of value. This is not hex. This could be something else, and we could analyze those things as well. So why don't we try to create our own little type of cookie here? I can take, for example, half of this string, and I can go and say, hey, please, would you please base64 the value, say, what would be a good user ID for an administrator? Maybe the first user on the system. So I can take this, move output to input, and I can just see what happens if I set this as my cookie. Of course, this would have to be converted to hex. So I would do 2 hex here, and the output has some extra spaces in it, so no delimiter. And this kind of looks like the same output we had before. It starts with a 4, has a %3D, and let's just see what happens if we set this as our cookie. We are now changing parts of the cookie, and of course, the solution now says that we're an administrator. The nice thing is that the sequencer allows you to find stuff like this. I'll also use the sequencer in the next demo, where we'll see how we can find encrypted contents and use it to actually break encryption. So moving on into the intruder. Oh, one of the best features of Burp Suite is Intruder. It allows us to fuss with different injection points, with different payloads per injection point, and different attack types. We can grep output, we can extract output from our attacks. It is the go-to tool for fussing today if you don't want to script it yourself. If you don't have access to the pro version, the Intruder will be very slow, as I mentioned before, but consider this as a good exercise in learning how to script, I guess. But for pen testing daily work, you want to be efficient, you don't want to be scripting everything, you want a quick, efficient way to get your stuff done. So we can set these injection points with these paragraph symbols here. So we define basically variables where we want to insert some kind of payload. And we can also define what type of attack we want. The sniper attack will basically take one payload and go through each variable and hit that payload across all of them till you're out of injection points. The battering ram will take this one payload and just ram them all at the same time. So if you have a list of 20 words, for example, it will be 20 requests going towards this website. Whereas the pitchfork, you can define multiple payloads. So you can, for example, define 4 different lists of words. They all have 20 payloads. And when you hit attack, you will send each payload to each position at the same time, trying to basically pitchfork that solution to death. Might be useful for some scenarios when one payload needs to match up with another payload, for example, and you can create word lists that are working. And then the most useful one, I guess, second to sniper, is a cluster bomb, which is basically a nested for each loop, where for each payload 1, you will go through every payload 2, and it will create a bunch of requests, but it's quite useful. When it comes to payloads, there's a bunch of them. Many different payloads we can use. We can go into the Intruder here, we can check them out. So there's the payload types up here, which simple list is nice. The runtime file is basically when you have gigantic files and you want to load them during runtime. You don't want to load them into memory of Burp Suite immediately, which will probably lag your Burp Suite and cause it to crash. And there's numbers here, there's brute forcing stuff. There's a bunch of interesting things here. So why don't we take a look at one of the things we can use Burp Suite for, which is a very simple scenario of us having this little ID parameter up here, and there might be other interesting IDs to look at. So we're gonna proxy this request quite easily, just intercept on. We do like this, press Control-I, send it to Intruder. And I like to remove the cookies so the web server doesn't know who I am from each request. Click Add. Surrounds it with these little paragraphs. I now have a payload I can define. I only have one payload, so it's just going to be one dropdown here. And I can say, hey, please go from numbers. And I want to iterate through numbers. But what numbers do I want? Do I want to go from 0 to this value? That's going to take a long time. It might even cause you to be detected in your pen test. So I'm just going to go 1,000 numbers lower and 1,000 numbers higher, at least for my initial attack. and I'm gonna hit start. And this will cause me to send a bunch of requests, which I can now sort on, for example, content length to know if I'm hitting something useful. You can also sort on requests here and use the content length as a separate sorting indicator or sorting key. So now you can see that I can see the latest development with my script, but I'm actually sorting on content length. And that's a quite useful feature as well if you need to pay attention to the request you're sending. You can also add columns here like response completed. You can see how many milliseconds it took for this response to complete on the server side. And this is in a realm of like blind injections and timing attacks. You will use this column. But by going through these 1,000 values, we can see that we found this other type of response when we sent this response in. So the first one here is the baseline request, and it's the same one as this one. However, when we send this number in, we get this kind of response, and we see that the power of automation secret stuff might be here. Failure to restrict URL access. The render tab, by the way, it's crap in 1.7, but in 2.0, they redesigned the entire rendering engine, so you now have like a much better rendering engine for like complex JavaScript pages, single page applications, and so on. But Intruder allows you to very easily script things like this. But there's more. Of course, there's more. There is, for example, intruder2.php. Here we have an application that has some cache, and we're the user 31337. There's apparently no input, but if you look at the source code, there is actually this input here, big hex string. If we decode it, it is actually just encrypted. So for each time we refresh this page, we get a new fully encrypted string here. But we can add it to the get parameters like this. Now, of course, as attackers, we're interested in looking at what does this string represent? What's the significance of this string? Could be that it controls the output. If I, for example, here add like a couple of extra bytes here, we can see that it breaks the script. It just tried to decrypt this little string here and figure out how much cache you have and what username you have and so on. And you didn't pass in the proper things for the encryption routine. So what we could do here is we could intercept the request with the proxy. So we could intercept it without, let me do this request here. And we send it to the sequencer. In the sequencer, we can now configure it to fetch this value here, the data field. And we can tell it to, hey, start a live capture. Give me like maybe 1,000 requests here. We can click Analyze Now, and it will start going through, analyzing it, seeing how strong crypto we have here. I can also copy the tokens out to Notepad as before, and we can check to see, do they look good or not? In our case, well, they look fairly random. I don't see any patterns at all. And this is also what this tool will tell us, that, hey, this is actually proper crypto. This is good stuff. There is no like characters that are being repeated over and over again. This is proper crypto. So with the tokens, though, we can analyze them further. We could take them into say, for example, CyberChef again. Yes, CyberChef can be used for so much stuff. We have these tokens up here, and we could basically say split, and we can tell it to split on the delimiter of line feed, so /n, and we can join on nothing. And this will cause this output to be a sequence of output like this. And then we can say, hey, please do hex decode for us from hex. And there's a bunch of binary data. But from here, we can use entropy, the function entropy here, to see, is this actually encrypted or not? And lo and behold, yes, it's actually a very high encryption value, entropy value here, indicating that this is actually properly encrypted. All right, but is it game over? Not with Intruder. With Intruder, we have the possibility to attack crypto. We can, for example, say intercept this request here where we have the data portion set. So we intercept it, I press Control-I, send it to the Intruder, and we have our position set already. Now, this is where we want to fuss. And of course, we can try for things such as SQL injection, cross-scripting, whatever. We can try those things. But in this case, we're looking at crypto, and we want to try crypto attacks. So why don't we set up our payload type here to be, instead of like a number or just a simple list of words, we can tell it to be a bit flipper, going through every byte of the response, flipping bits inside of bytes to see how the application performs and how it behaves when you're flipping bits here. And the default values here are okay. Encoded as ASCII hex. I'm going to select all the bits to flip, and we can just click Start Attack. and it goes very, very quickly through the strings. You can see the payload changes as it goes down here, changes of different things. Now here you can start filtering on status codes, on length, and you can go exploring, right? But there's more to Intruder than that. There is, for example, the grep match, where we can say that, hey, the output should list if we have, for example, the SQL keyword listed, or we have the grep extract, where we want to add another column to the output, where we're extracting pieces of the data. For example, the cache and username field. So going back to the results table now, we can see that, hey, my tool now automatically extracts the value out of this field. You can see there's a bunch of, so this is crypto failing, there's a bunch of output here that doesn't make sense. But as I go down here, I might find the one request that actually works, the one bit that when flipped gives us a new username, or it gives us, for example, more cache. I can right click, copy URL, open it up in my browser, and now it says cache 900. And you could potentially break crypto like this. I love this, very, very much fun. The final example is going to be Burp Proof. So here I have this little tool which basically just says view access. Now obviously we want to attack this parameter up here. So I'm going to be intercepting it again, proxy intercept, and I have it in my browser, in my Burp now, send it to the intruder, and we can start toying with attacks. Now in applications like these, where you have this little view access, obviously I would be in my repeater trying to see what happens when I change the view access manually, like what happens when I remove it. I just press Control-R, by the way, to move into repeater. Like what happens with application? And you will see that there's always this little redirect back to view access. But view access, view, that's a verb. Can't we fuss the verb? Like, can I do like view and add only up like paragraphs around the view parameter and see if there's anything other than view, like add or get or change, modify, and so on? And yes, you can. And Burp Suite has a lot of built-in word lists for this type of works. For example, server-side variable names. So ID user, action user, page user, name user, password user, all these, or access, sorry, view access. So ID access, password access, and so on. We can try all of these things in front of the keyword and see how the application behaves. And it will just keep running, right? 2,500 requests. Not necessarily a big deal. If you have a slow application, you might have to leave this running for a while, but still, you can now filter on status code, and almost immediately we can see on request number 639, when we have the grant access parameter, we have something else of an output. So we paste it in, and we can see that, hey, there's a warning, only authorized personnel should be here. By the way, this is CSS, copy pasted off Stack Overflow. So it's just CSS, I love it. And I do like copy pasting of Stack Overflow. That's how I roll. So, all right, we could find some additional access, and we should always do these type of things on our URLs. Other things though, there might be more stuff hidden here. Like grant access, there might be other stuff, and we might find that in our outputs. But the other stuff might be represented with an extra parameter. It might be like, but maybe if you add, like, say, developer equals on, the application changes. This is what parent minor tries to do for you. So we can set up a similar type of attack in Intruder here, defining 2 extra parameter after an ampersand here. We say one parent 1, and we say one value here, and we can configure attack for a cluster bomb. So we can say for each value of 1, we want to go through every value of 2. And we do this in our list configuration here, in our payload configuration. So I'm going to clear out, and I'm going to use a built-in word list called form names. So the first field is going to be like access, admin, allow, auth, debug, and so on. So say, for example, access equals something of value 2. And value 2 could be another list. It can be, for example, form values. So access equals admin, for example. Those things are going to be tested now. Notice the number of requests are quite big now, because for each payload 1, we're going to go through every single payload of payload 2. And we can, of course, configure our options more. Nice things is to, for example, follow redirections, very, very useful, and also process cookies. Those things might be useful when targeting login fields and more. Click Start Attack, and it will just go through. Maybe we can filter on content like here. And all of a sudden, we have this huge outlier here. When given the payload 1 user, payload 2 of debug, so user equals debug, when given that, we have this insane big content length. Copy URL, go back over to the solution paste in, the browser, paste in, we now have PHP info coming at us. So you will find sometimes that developers have built in backdoors to them. You will see that there's unkeyed or unlinked input to parameter to applications that you cannot see in the application, but they accept all these other parameters that you should be toying with, and you should find those to actually map out the full attack surface of the application. Maybe some of these things, maybe this would be a button inside of the admin interface that only when you click that button, you will add this little ampersand user equals debug, but you cannot see the admin interface because you're a hacker, you're trying to break in. So you should be guessing for those things. So definitely useful. You should be using your own specialized word list using, for example, Cool or FuzzDB. So here at Net Security, we have a huge series of word lists. We collect them, we create new ones in every engagement, and that makes us very much successful in our engagements. We use this with the Intruder. So of course, you can filter and everything I talked about. You can also copy paste off these columns. So you can, for example, say, filter, show me only 200 OKs. And then you can select the outputs from your list, copy paste them into Excel, and then you can do some further filtering in Excel and learn about the attacks that you're performing. Very, very nice tool, the Intruder. So finally, in concluding here, I want to share with you my minimal viable testing process. So for each and every customer, this is at least the things I want to ensure that is being done on every single script, on everything inside of the organization that we're targeting. So considering the scope, this is at least the things we want to perform for the clients. So first of all, we're going to browse the entire application, and we're going to be discovering all the functionality, manually browsing through everything. We're going to be utilizing content discovery. We're going to be utilizing Paraminer, and we're going to be using JS parser to see if there's anything extra we can find that adds to the attack surface. And then we do a quick browse of the entire attack surface using the Burp Collaborator Everywhere, the extension, and it will add some headers to our request, giving us indications if there's any potential vulnerabilities with callbacks there and more. So once we have that sitemap built up, so we have the full sitemap of all the functionality that we can find, we now move into trying functionality such as, hey, for all of these verbs, like I just showed you, is there anything extra things that are being revealed? So if there's like a show user action, there might be an add user, an update user, and so on. We go through those word lists, trying to figure out if there's any extra functionality. And then once we have a good solid grasp of the entire functionality for each script, we send it to the repeater. So Control R on your keyboard, send it to the repeater, and then start repeating requests and try to manually see if there's any attacks you can perform here. And also, you need to understand the scripts before trying to hack them. So using that repeater, I kind of get to know the script a little bit. And then I press Control I send from the repeater into Intruder, and I define all the variables I want to send to the active scanning function. So nice little tip here, inside of Intruder, here, positions it, I can right click now and say scan defined insert points. So I want to do this for all the scripts. I want to scan all the parameters and variables here. I want to scan this one. So this one should be scanned by the active scanner. This parameter should be scanned by the active scanner. I might want to scan some headers and so on. And it's very important for us to send and get that script and get that functionality to at least be tested by a vulnerability scanner. It might find some low-hanging fruits. And when we use the active scanner ++ and we use the / powered scanner, we will find those interesting weird stuff that we can send back to the repeater and manually start attacking the application and figure out vulnerabilities. We also like to, in the Intruder, we like to use our own fuzzing list. So we do have our own version of the FuzzDB, but we also say, hey, say for example, we have this value up here, this one. We can also say that I want to fuzz every possible value from %00 to %FF. And that's, of course, done with the number payload. So I can say here, for example, numbers, and I can go from 00 to FF. Step 1 is going to be hex. It's going to be always 2 numbers. And I can go check how the application works when sending a null byte, when sending a little double quote, send a single tick, sending all the possible values in the world that is currently possible using ASCII. I can see how the application behaves with that, and we can find those weird stuff. And we have to do this for absolutely everything. If not, we're going to miss some low-hanging fruit. We're probably going to miss some vulnerability that we should have found, and nothing is more embarrassing than a customer getting hacked by some kind of trivial hack after the fact that they've had a pen test of you. So that is 1 hour. I do appreciate your time. I hope you liked it. I guess we might have time for some questions. I definitely have time to hang on the line for another 10 minutes or so. So please take us out, Carol and Jason.
Hey, Chris, I have a quick question from David. David says, are we able to get a copy of the test pages to practice with? Thank you.
So that's a great question. Copy of the test pages. The core of my system is based on the damn vulnerable Linux web application. Damn vulnerable web application. And the other scripts I've just basically modified, added some custom stuff to them. I don't have them online in any way, shape, or form, and I don't plan to put them out there, but they're basically just modified versions of the damn vulnerable web applications. Just go out there on GitHub, download it, or go to OWASP and download the WebGoat, and you'll have dozens of vulnerable solutions where you can practice these techniques and see what it's all about. Also, one more thing, I do apologize for speaking very fast and going very fast in this presentation. I just got so much to share. I had to remove slides before going into this presentation because there's just so much to talk about within the Burp Suite.
Understood. So for everyone listening, the recording will be available at sans.org/webcast, and it'll be available on YouTube for you to go back and be able to watch. Quick question here. What's the difference between spidering and crawling?
So in terms of Burp Suite, when it comes to version 1.7, it used to be called spidering, and you would have your Burp Suite go through finding every reference, every relative path, and so on, and try to go into those places to see if there's any content there. However, with the Burp Suite 2.0, they now call it crawling, which is basically the spidering, but the entire function has been redesigned. So it's much better. It works much better with single page applications. It basically uses like Phantom.js or no, sorry, I can't remember the library they use. But I'm envisioning when they're now crawling, they're actually rendering a web page and they're clicking links and stuff for you, and like going through into multiple different paths and showing you the content that an application has. So it's basically just revealing the content, the spidering, and going deep into the application to see what functionality is there.
All right, and I have one more last question. For everyone currently listening, if you enjoyed today's webcast, and if there was any aspect of it you would like us to go into detail with, either through a blog or future webcasts, please let us know. So the last question is, I just lost it. How did you?
Yeah, go ahead, man.
So the last question is, how did you get that content discovery window open?
Oh yeah, I right-click on a script or a folder I want. So for example, the config here, right-click, engagement tools, discover contents. So it's kind of like a DIRbuster for Burp.
And we have time for one last question. What is the speed difference between GoBuster and the non-recursive search option?
One more time, the question was difference between.
What is the speed difference between GoBuster and the non-recursive search option?
Right. Not sure, to be honest, the speed, but I'm guessing it's all going to come down to the number of threads that you have going here for you. I know DIRbuster can be really, really fast, and it can be even really bandwidth intrusive even. But I'm guessing DIRbuster is going to be faster in general. I'm just guessing though. I'm not tremendously happy with the content discovery in general. It does really do its work, but there's a lot of room for improvement. For example, while we were doing content discovery here, like there's these tasks that are being produced down here. You cannot delete these. You cannot tell it to move on, for example. It might, for example, crawl itself into paths of the application that you don't want it to be going into, and there's no way to like tell it to move on and continue. Quite like that. That is what it is, isn't it?
Awesome. So we're getting a lot of feedback, so thank you so much for the feedback. One person asked if there's a class that teaches this. The Security 504 class goes into some web app pen testing, and also our web app pen course, the 542 class. Yeah.
Exactly, yeah.
And then Chris, to finish this off today, where are you teaching next? And then what's your final thoughts for today?
Teaching next in Dubai in 2 weeks-ish. So looking forward to that. And then I'm going to teach in Dublin in December. Final thoughts, closing words. Thank you all for listening. I know I had to go a bit quick, and it's also the disconnect. I'm just talking to a web camera here, you know. I don't see people nodding. I don't see all that stuff. So it's kind of like awkward. But overall, I hope you liked it, and hit me up on Twitter and let me know how it was. Right?
Awesome. Thanks, Chris. And over to you, Carol, to finish this up.
All right. Thank you so much, Chris, for your great presentation, which helps bring this content to the SANS community. To our audience, we greatly appreciate you listening in. For a schedule of all upcoming and archived SANS webcasts, including this one, please visit sans.org/webcasts. Until next time, take care, and we hope to have you back again for the next SANS webcast.